Welcome to the Promotion and Relegation Show. We have advanced to Week 15 and the last week of the regular season. The Tier 1 and 3 conferences have wrapped up their seasons this week as they prepare for Conference Championship Saturday in Week 16. The Tier 2 conferences will be finishing their seasons this week. From last week, we already know where most teams will be relegated to, but still await who is going to be promoted and who will win the Southeast Division in the Sun Belt. We know that Colorado State has been promoted, which will force UNLV to move down to Tier 4. We also know that Utah State and Northern Illinois will be playing for their chance to be promoted to Tier 2 in Conference Championship Saturday. We have also known that BYU, SMU, UCF, and Cincinnati are all going to be relegated to their Tier 2 conferences, and that Miami, Ohio will be the team that will replace Cincinnati in the ACC and Tier 1. But there are still some questions about who will be playing in other conference championships and the scenarios of the teams in Tier 2 of who will be promoted and who's going to sit in that relegation zone spot. So without further delay, let's go ahead and see the results of this week's action, starting with Tier 1. We already know that Oregon will be facing USC for the conference title game, but both teams were able to win this week to keep themselves in the top 5, which will keep them in the running for the national title game and setting up an exciting conference championship. So now we move to the Big 12. We already found out that SMU will be the team relegated last week and that Oklahoma has been waiting for the other division to determine their champion. All Texas A&M has to do is win their game against Missouri and they will win the division. Oklahoma State and Texas face each other, and the winner of that game would need Texas A&M to lose to be the champion. Texas was able to come away with the win over Oklahoma State, which now leads us to Texas A&M's game. They were able to beat Missouri handedly, which will earn them the division and the opportunity to play the number 1 team in the nation, Oklahoma, for the Big 12 title game. Now moving southeast to the SEC. Last week, we determined that UCF was going to be relegated and that North Carolina was the division champion, and we're waiting to play either Alabama again or play Miami. All Alabama needed to do was beat their rival and they would be division champs. Miami needed to win over Clemson and have Alabama lose in order to be division champion. Miami easily beat Clemson in their game, which only leaves Alabama and Auburn. Auburn was able to come from behind and beat their rival by a single point, which now moves Alabama out of first place in the division, and that will mean that Miami is going to be the champions of the division after beating Alabama earlier in the year, which means they will now face North Carolina for that conference title. And lastly, in Tier 1, we will go to the ACC. We knew that Ohio State has been dominant in their division and are hoping to keep their national title defense alive. They are waiting to play the other division winner as well. We also know that Cincinnati is going to be the team that is going to be relegated. The other division had 3 teams that were able to win the division. Michigan were playing their rival and only needed to win to finish in first place. But if they lost that game, they would need both Penn State and Syracuse to lose their games. Penn State was facing Michigan State and Syracuse was finishing with the relegated team to Cincinnati. Syracuse would need to win this game and have both Penn State and Michigan lose their games to finish in first place after they have beaten both teams. Syracuse was unable to do what they needed to do by losing to Cincinnati, which would only leave Penn State and Michigan. Penn State did their job and beat Michigan State. and Michigan was unable to do theirs by getting blasted by their rival Ohio State. With that loss and the Penn State win, that means that Penn State are going to finish in first place and will face Ohio State for the conference title. Ohio State will be playing to stay in the national title game and defend their championship from last season. We're going to skip Tier 2 for now, as they have one game to go in their seasons to determine who's going to be relegated and promoted. We will talk about them at the end after we talk about the Tier 3 teams. Last week we found out that Utah State and Northern Illinois will be facing each other for that opportunity to be promoted to Tier 2, and that UNLV will be the team that is relegated to Tier 4, with Colorado State moving up. Also in the Sun Belt, we knew that Temple was the team from the Northeast that was going to be playing for the conference championship, but the Southeast champion was going down to the wire in the last week to determine their first place team. Virginia did not have a conference game this week, already finishing with a 6-2 conference record. They are sitting preliminarily as the first place team, while 5-2 Western Kentucky still have one game to go. Western Kentucky has the tiebreaker over Virginia and only need to win their game against newly promoted South Alabama to win the division and play for promotion. They were unable to get it done, losing to South Alabama, which means that Virginia will be the team that wins the Southeast Division and will play in the conference championship game. This is the best thing that could have happened for the bottom teams in the American Conference, Virginia Tech and Memphis. That's because Temple will be the team from the Sun Belt to be promoted this year, because Virginia is ineligible for promotion after they were relegated last year. And just as that quick reminder for you again, a team that is newly relegated from the year previous cannot be promoted in that very next year. This means that the American Conference will not have anybody relegated, but instead the MAC will be the Tier 2 conference in the East Side, having one of their teams relegated, while Temple will be the team that is moving up. Virginia still gets the opportunity to play for the conference title, however, to try and add that trophy to their trophy case. Which now leaves us with the Tier 2 conferences and the promotion and relegation scenarios for this last week of the season. We will start it all off in the West with the Mountain West. So coming into week 14, Alaska was sitting at the top with an undefeated record and was putting that to the test against Kansas, who was just coming off a win against the other top team, Washington State. Washington State had this week off in terms of a conference game. They played their rival in the Apple Cup this week and ended up losing that one, which will certainly keep them out of the top 10 for the remainder of the season. Kansas was able to come away with the victory over Alaska, which will now give them the ultimate pathway forward to promotion after beating both Alaska and Washington State. So this is how the scenarios are going to be laid out for these three teams. Kansas has the ultimate path to win the conference, like we've said. They hold the tiebreaker over both Alaska and Washington State, and they will finish their season against California. All they will need to do is win that game, and they will be the team that is promoted. Alaska and Washington State now play against each other in the last week of the season. The winner of this game will need Kansas to lose in order to finish at the top. So now let's talk about the bottom of the conference. The relegation zone teams are going to be Fresno State and San Diego State. And both of them were playing each other this week, which will determine who would be the team that would finish at the bottom of the conference and be in danger of being relegated. San Diego State was able to pull off a close one to secure their safety in staying in the Mountain West and Tier 2. This will clearly put Fresno State at the bottom and in the relegation zone spot. They will await the winner of the Conference USA Championship game. If Utah State wins, then Fresno State would be the team that will be relegated to Tier 3. So now moving on to the ever-competitive Big Ten, starting with the teams that are fighting for promotion. Tulane and Wisconsin faced off against each other this week. The winner would get full control of their destiny going into the last week of the season with a tiebreaker and sole possession of first place for now. And that honor is going to go to Wisconsin after a shootout. They now hold the keys to their destiny, being the only team to have one loss in the Big Ten. UTEP faced UTSA to try and keep themselves alive at promotion and were able to pull off that close victory. This keeps them alive with their wins over both Wisconsin and Tulane, and will need a Wisconsin loss now to stay alive. So now we are going to be going over the scenarios of what each team needs to finish at the top of the conference. So starting off with Wisconsin, they are going to finish their season facing off against Minnesota. UTEP will finish with Tulsa, and Tulane is going to finish with Iowa. However, there are only two teams that have a real shot at finishing at the top of the conference. Those two are Wisconsin and UTEP. With Tulane's loss to Wisconsin and UTEP, they are now out of the running of being promoted. All Wisconsin has to do is beat Minnesota this week, and they will be the team that is promoted. However, if they were to lose, they would need UTEP to lose their game against Tulsa. UTEP will need to beat Tulsa and have Wisconsin lose for them to be able to finish at the top. It also wouldn't hurt them to have Nebraska lose either, as they're a 2-loss team in conference as well. As has been mentioned in the past, Nebraska is ineligible for promotion this season due to being relegated last year, so that's why we are not looking at them as a team that is viable for promotion for this season. So now we get to look at the teams on the bottom. Minnesota was able to beat Tulsa this week, which will make them easily safe going into the last week of the season, which now leaves us with Iowa, UTSA, and Tulsa. We already know that UTSA and Tulsa have lost their games this week, keeping them on the bottom. Iowa played Nebraska this week and were unable to win in a close defensive battle. That means that we are in a dead set tie for last place, with each team beating each other. Iowa currently is on the bottom of those three due to the Big Ten tie-breaking scenarios. Iowa will finish with Tulane, UTSA will finish with Texas Tech, and Tulsa will finish with UTEP. Each team has a fairly even shot of finishing at the bottom with all the scenarios that could play out. So starting with 8th place for Tulsa to be safe, they will need to win. If they were to lose, they would only need UTSA to lose. A UTSA win would put them in the relegation zone because Iowa would have the tiebreaker over them no matter what Iowa does. So now for UTSA to stay safe, they would need to win. If they were to lose, they would need Iowa to lose because of their victory over them. If UTSA lost and Iowa won, then UTSA would be the team in the relegation zone. So now for Iowa. If they win, they cannot have UTSA and Tulsa win their games. However, on a win, they could stay safe if only one of those teams were to win. They would also stay safe with a win and both of the other teams losing their games. If Iowa were to lose, the only way they can be safe is if Tulsa were to lose and UTSA were to win because of the tiebreaker they have over Tulsa. Any other scenario would put Iowa in that relegation zone. They are in the most danger because nothing is in their hands. They have to rely on the other two to be safe, and you can never expect an easy finish in the Big Ten. There are always crazy scenarios in this very competitive conference. Whoever finishes here on the bottom will wait for the Conference USA Championship game. If Northern Illinois were to win that game, they would be the team moving down, and Northern Illinois gets to move up. So now we get to move on to the Southeast and the American Conference. NC State lost this week, which will take them easily out of the running for first place in the conference. It wouldn't have mattered for them, though, other than pride, because they are ineligible for promotion. Which now leaves us with the 3 teams that are eligible for promotion this year: Wake Forest, UAB, and South Carolina. Wake Forest was the only team to have a game this week among those teams, which was against Memphis. They were able to run away with that, which will now mean that UAB is out of the running for promotion this year, leaving only Wake Forest and South Carolina. Wake Forest will finish with Duke, and South Carolina will finish against the very tough Mississippi State team. If Wake Forest were to win, they would be the team that finishes solely at the top of the conference and earn promotion to the SEC. If they were to lose, they would need South Carolina to lose, because their one loss so far was against them. The only way South Carolina can win the conference is by beating Mississippi State and having Wake Forest lose. And now for relegation, we know that no one is going to be relegated from the American Conference, because Virginia was the team to win the Southeast Division in the Sun Belt. And because they are ineligible for promotion, that means no one is going to be moving up from that division. Duke, Virginia Tech, and especially Memphis are incredibly grateful for that, because they are the teams that are sitting on the bottom of the conference. And lastly, we move on to the Northeast Conference, being the MAC. We already know that Miami, Ohio are going to be the team that is promoted to the ACC and are padding their stats by keeping their undefeated record going by destroying Eastern Michigan this week. Eastern Michigan's loss will also mean that they are going to be the team that is relegated out of the MAC and into the Sun Belt next season, as they will not be able to catch up to Army with only one game to go. And that is how promotion and relegation and the conference championships will shape out this week. Still promotion battles going on in Tier 2, as well as relegation zone battles, all with everything to play for this week. Our conference championships are set, and our promotion game has been ready to go. We found out what team will be promoted and what team will be replacing them as well this week. Thank you all so much for watching this Week 15 Promotion and Relegation Show. Make sure to catch us next week as we find out the teams that will be promoted from Tier 2 into their Tier 1 conferences, as well as the results of the conference championship games and the promotion game from the Conference USA. Make sure to leave a like if you are enjoying the series, and be sure to subscribe if you are new, and share it with a friend. And we will see you next week to wrap up the season and move us into the bowl games.